Today, legendary venture capitalist Brad Feld on shame and fear and our relationships with depression, our mental health, and the people we love. I'm Morra Aarons-Mele, and this is The Anxious Achiever, the show that looks at the intersection of mental health and leadership and work and asks, how can we do it all better? If you've followed entrepreneurship or tech over the past couple decades, you probably know the name Brad Feld. He's co-founder of the VC firm Foundry, co-founder of Techstars, and he's really one of the rare leaders who's built lasting success while being radically transparent about his own mental health. Brad has lived with OCD, depression, anxiety, and he's chosen not to hide it. We talk about his long journey through therapy, the moment his wife Amy said, "I can't keep living the way that we are," and how that reckoning taught him what he calls internal consistency, aligning what you say with what you feel and what you actually do. We talk about what he calls passive avoidance, the silent regret of knowing that something's wrong and not dealing with it, which I definitely did this morning when I realized that none of the introductions to my podcast had been saved, and I have just had hand surgery and I just ignored it. I ignored it and I sat there and I got angry and anxious at the same time. We know that that's a really fun combination, right? Angry and anxious at the same time. And I remembered what Brad said, that this anxiety, this anger, this avoidance, it will either be inflicted outward on other people or turned inward until it burns you up. And so Brad shares sort of the dashboard and the methods he uses now to do better behaviors and monitor his own mental health. It's a thoughtful conversation about what it really takes to build a life, a company, a relationship consistently when you're managing mental health struggles. My conversation with Brad Feld. Brad, I have known who you are, not that I'm in the investing world or Silicon Valley or any of that, but because you really were one of the first people I ever came across who was really successful and really open about your mental health. And I guess my question for you is, why? What spurred you? Was there a catalyst that made you think, oh man, I'm going to go public and write about this? Like, how did you do it? How'd you get the courage?
Well, the why is simple. It's that at some point I realized how insidious the stigma was around mental health. And I decided that one of the things that I would put energy into was trying to destigmatize issues around mental health. That's the why.
Yeah.
That's the thing that triggered it, or that caused me to get there, was in 2013. I had a very significant depressive episode. It was not the first one I'd had. I'd had multiple ones over the years. And a couple things happened. One was, if you looked at my world from the outside, things were going great. My business was good. Foundry was doing great. Techstars was doing great. My marriage was healthy with my wife, Amy. Physically, I thought I was in good shape. Obviously I had some physiological challenges at the time, and some physical challenges were triggers too. And I could talk about those if we want. But from a fitness perspective, I was doing well. So outside looking in, I was loving living in Boulder, like all those things were good. And I had this very, very, very significant depressive episode. And as part of that, I started therapy again. I had done therapy in my 20s, and I'm 47 when this happens. And, my first goal with therapy was just get out of crisis. And I did. It was like 3 months I was out of whatever crisis I was in. I was still depressed probably for 6 months. At the time, I was blogging daily. I'd been blogging daily since 2004, 2005 about all things entrepreneurship, venture related, personal, like just whatever. It wasn't a marketing blog. It was just, it was an old style blog that, existed where people just
Hugely influential, really influential.
I was, I was influenced by, to do it. I did it at the same time as a couple of other close friends started blogging, and we reinforced each other. Fred Wilson was another,
Yeah.
another one at the time. Jerry Colonna, who also started blogging and then stopped.
Jerry's been on the show.
Okay, great. So Jerry, like to the extent that you can have a non-romantic partner soulmate, Jerry is my soulmate, one of my closest friends. And in that time period, so I'm sort of talking about all this stuff, and I felt like I would be bullshitting myself not to write about the experience I was having.
Yeah.
Forget about anybody that was reading it. Like, of course, I'd be bullshitting them too if I wasn't writing. Like, oh, like everything's great, and like, don't pay attention to this thing over here. But it was really an internal dynamic, which was something that I discovered pretty early on, was that the stigma and shame associated with mental health and mental health related challenges, especially in entrepreneurship, had a negative feedback loop
Hmm.
with regard to whatever somebody was dealing with and going through. So that was one. And then the other part was Jerry. And Jerry, who's been very open about his own struggles over the years. He and I would talk regularly. In fact, the therapist that I started seeing was a referral of Jerry's, somebody he knew from Naropa in Boulder. And he ended up, Jerry knew me really well, so he made a fantastic recommendation. I did a decade with this guy named McAndrew Jack, who was spectacular for me. And so it was kind of a bunch of things bundled together in this moment that all were reinforcing around, gosh, there's this stigma. And carrying it when you're depressed, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're a high achiever, when you're public, it just even makes it all worse. And it's through line for that back to the first time I really acknowledged that I was depressed, which was in my early 20s, probably 23, 24. I was incredibly ashamed of everything around my depression in my 20s. I was running a company, I was CEO of a company, so I was, ashamed that I was depressed. I
Hmm.
was ashamed that I eventually started therapy. So I was ashamed that I was doing therapy. I was ashamed that I was taking medication. And this is in the early 1990s. And so like I could kind of track multiple points in time where I'd have these significant depressive episodes. They eventually, I think in this last sort of decade of therapy that I did with McAndrew, which I ended, I hate the word for it, which is terminate.
Isn't that
Um,
awful? I know.
I don't understand it. To all the therapists out there, change the word. Like just a really something about it I don't like. But when I ended therapy with McAndrew, I think I had really gotten a good handle on a lot of the things that were causing these episodes. But when I was in my 20s, I really couldn't get at the root of it.
Hmm.
And even in my 30s, when I had a couple of episodes and was struggling with it, couldn't get at the root of it. And understanding that was profound in, let's say my early to mid 50s when I finally started to get my arms around it. And then when I look back at, the last 30 years of my life, while I would sort of only say I only had these 3 depressive episodes, what I realized was that I actually had many more that were shorter, that were not as significant, that I would label with things like burnout or tired or fatigue or whatever. And a lot of it was just not having a good understanding physiologically of what was important from a boundary and energy level,
Hmm.
um, combined with not really getting at the root cause of some of the behaviors that were causing me to do things that would then create that. So if you tie it back to your question, like what made me be public about it? Why am I still public about it? Why am I willing to talk about it? It's because I think there's an incredible number of people who are entrepreneurs, founders, high achievers, put whatever label you want on it. A large amount of society struggles with this, but especially in the context of this category where the stigma really inhibits ability to understand not just oneself, but actually be more effective at whatever one is doing, to do it with more joy. For me, depression is the complete and total absence of joy. So I can be functional, I can get shit done, but
Yeah.
I have no joy. It's been that motivation.
It's funny. I open my book, The Anxious Achiever, with the story of sort of my great white whale, which was a very successful tech executive who I knew personally, who I knew had, very overwhelming anxiety. And I sort of was always like, will you talk to me about it? It would make such a difference if you talked about it because you're so worshipped by so many people in the industry and like, just talk about it. And even after his IPO, after everything, it was just he just couldn't, it was like, "It's not you, it's me, I just can't." And I think that in our society, there's so much fear that if we admit to the fact that we have anxiety or depression or something else, people won't see us as reliable leaders worth putting, faith into or money into, right? It's like this very deep fear.
I think there's a couple of things, and like naming the fear is such a powerful starting point, right? And, in my 20s, when I say I was ashamed, fear is probably a good, fear, shame, the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
my clients, the customers of my first company would all of a sudden say, oh, well, he's a 23-year-old with depression. Like, I'm not going to pay him money to do this. I'm not going to rely on his company to build these software systems for, my company. And that was a piece of it. There was a familial piece of it, which was, the dynamics with my parents and my parents' ability or not to engage with me in a productive way around it, other friends.
Hmm.
And of course, one of the challenge, and not of course, but one of the challenges I think, especially for me at that time, was something I learned later. The I learned it in a different context, which is the question, how can I help? When somebody asks the question, how can I help of me in that context, it's not helpful. It just puts another
Mm.
burden on me. It's like I have to now, in this state where I'm already struggling just to make it through each day in a functional way, you just asked me to like figure another thing out.
Right.
If I knew what to do, I wouldn't be
Exactly.
depressed. So I don't have any idea what you can do to help me. So, just like another challenge in that. So there's a bucket of that. Um, but there was another part of it which I found it really interesting, and there's a few people who really inspire me or have inspired me over the years. Paul English is one of them, with
Me
just
too.
willingness to like just lay it out there. And the book that he did with Tracy Kidder, that Tracy Kidder did about him, it's a different. I have obsessive compulsive disorder, so OCD is the underlying uh, diagnosis. In Paul's case, it was bipolar. But like the understanding that there's elements of it that are really powerful in terms of your personality. It shapes you in different ways, but that if you just view them as, wow, this is great, this is like the thing that drives me, it's really toxic for all the people and systems around you. And so, like being able to step back from it, and I hear this from lots of people, in current current world. Oh, I'm OCD about blah, 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 or OCD is my superpower. And most of the people that say that, like, I give them a pass from the standpoint of not having OCD, not knowing what it is, not understanding that OCD really is that the O's and the C's have to be linked to an irrational thought. And so you're using like part of your brain on this irrational thing that's going on, and you're then behaving in a way to try to control the environment. And why are you doing that? Okay, with deeper level of keep going.
Yeah.
And it's not a superpower. It's totally insidious. It's an thing to have to deal with in a real way. And yes, every human has obsessions and every human has compulsions. And by themselves, they're normal.
Yeah.
That's a normal part of the human experience. And that can actually be a powerful thing. It's when they get linked, and then that linkage to this irrational. If I don't do this certain way, this number of times, my mother will die.
Yeah.
Like where did that come
Oh
from?
God.
So I come back to this idea that as humans, we are all just big bags of chemicals. And our chemicals mix in different ways. And the experiences that we have influence a whole bunch of behaviors and things. And, as we're, how our brain develops and, as we're kids, and then the experiences that we have in life reinforce different things. And it really wasn't I mean, I'd like to think that I was always looking internally to try to understand myself better as part of my own life experience. But I don't think it was until that moment when I was 47 and I had this out of the blue, for me at least, completely unexpected, extreme depressive episode. And I'm like, yeah, for however long I'm on this planet,
Hmm.
it's time to, number one, figure out what's going on with me and try to figure it out in a way that is helpful to me so that my experience is better.
Yeah.
And once I got into that, then it came back to this starting point of the conversation, which is, man, there's a lot of people that are just in denial or afraid or fear or can't deal with or don't even know where to start
Yes.
in the context of being a high achiever. And my reaction to that when I sort of looked at that with myself was, you know what? If there's something that I can do from a leadership perspective to help people feel more comfortable with this, that will be positive. And then for me personally, it created an external and internal consistency. The
What does
which
that mean?
for me, one of the things I've learned is that when I'm inconsistent between what I feel and what I think and what I do, when there's an inconsistency, that messes me up. I'll give an example from a relationship that has nothing to do with mental health, which is a relationship with my wife Amy. We've been together for 35 years. We have a fantastic relationship. She's the most important person to me. Spending time with her is my favorite thing to do other than being alone. I like to be alone. And then number two, I like to spend time with her. And in the context of that, she's also my second wife. I married my high school girlfriend. And part of what created that depressive episode in my early 20s was a bunch of stuff around my relationship with her and the breakup of that. We didn't have kids.
Mhm.
More like an early 20s serious relationship where you live together today, where then it
Right. But you
blows.
were married.
But we happened to be married and it was fine. Like that part of it was maybe put a little bit more heaviness on it, but not much. The dynamics with Amy, she knew me. We had been friends through college, so she kind of knew it. She likes to say she knew what she was getting, in the context of our relationship. And about a decade in, and we wrote about this in a book we did together called Startup Life, that we wrote. I think it came out in 2013 or 14, so around the same time that I was struggling with this depressive episode. The start of the book talks about this experience where, 10 years into our relationship, she basically says, I'm done. And I interpret I'm done on a Friday night as, yeah, it was a long week and, let's have a nice weekend. And she's like, no, I mean, I think you're amazing. I love you. You're incredible, but I just don't want to live this way. And I don't want to watch you do this to yourself, like what
Wow.
you're doing. And I, like, well, what does that mean? Right. Like that's a moment. That's a pretty significant one. And I think in the end, when we worked through it, most of it was some version of my words and my actions didn't match up.
Mm.
So my words would be, you are the most important person to me. And my action would be, I'd be late to dinner. My action would be that we'd be having dinner together or doing something and the phone would ring. And this was, in, 2005, 6, 7, whatever. So, maybe caller ID, maybe not, I don't know. And I just stop what we were doing together and I'd pick up the phone and answer the phone. Or, just one more email, the version of that where, like,
I'm
she's
sure no
ready,
one listening can relate to that. Yeah.
right? She's ready and I'm
Yeah.
not, right?
Yeah.
And so the actions didn't link to the words. And for me, that internal consistency has become really important to me. I make a lot of mistakes. We all do.
Yeah.
Everybody who's successful has lots of things that don't work, lots of experiences that, if you're critical about it, they're failures. They could be a company, they could be a project, they could be an event, they could be a
Really.
relationship, they could be long list of things. They could be little failures, they could be big failures. But that's just part of the experience of life. Lots of things don't work out the way we want them to, no matter how hard we try to control the outcome. And from for me, like that internal way I deal with things and what's going on in my head and what I think has to match the external reality.
Mm-hmm.
And when it doesn't, when I look back on those things, and I talk about this in this new book, Give First, my regrets are not the failures that I've had. My regrets are what I've now labeled passive avoidance.
What's that?
I know that something is going on that I need to deal with,
Huh.
and I don't deal with it.
Right.
I know that I have a relationship problem that I need to address, and I just don't deal with it. I know that there's a problem somewhere that I need to go do something about, and I just don't deal with it. And I separate that from active avoidance, which is same, but I then say out loud, you know what? There's a problem over there. I'm not going to do anything about it. It's not my problem.
Right.
Or I choose, like, I'm going to live with this problem because I just don't want to put the energy into trying to address it. And when I look at that, if I separate this sort of concept of passive avoidance from failure, it's the passive avoidance is what I regret. And it's a good example of words not matching up with action. So when I think about, for
Yeah.
example, broken relationships, anybody that's been on planet Earth for, I'm about to turn 60, for 60 years is going to have some significant relationships that break.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know anybody in my world that doesn't. And you can, if somebody's listening, say, "Well, I don't have any that haven't broken." Great, awesome, congratulations. No judgment. I'm not, I don't. It's not my business to decide whether, someone has relationships that break or not. My belief system or my view is that that's a normal part of existence. Is that one will have some relationships that break for various reasons. And when I look at mine that have broken, the ones I regret are situations where passive avoidance played a role in the lead up to the breakage of the relationship. And that's my fault. And like even saying that out loud, like being comfortable with the idea that I'm complicit
Mm-hmm.
in the breakage of the relationship versus it's the other person's fault. Yeah, of course, they participated in whatever caused things to get to that place. But just saying it out loud allows me to be internally consistent. I'm like, okay, I got it. Like, my first marriage, like for a long time, I was very angry and upset. And, I was complicit in the failure of that through my behavior. Like, I totally get it now with the benefit of the distance of
I
time.
mean, but that's the beautiful thing about getting older, isn't it? I mean, you can take responsibility. I mean, I think, avoidance is such a funny thing because it's actually very adaptive, right? It's our brain trying to protect us from feeling bad. And it helps, we think, protect us from anxiety also. If I just don't think about it, it's not going to happen. But I like what you said about, it sounds like also understanding your values, right? And trying to be consistent with your values throughout it helps you also stop avoiding, I think.
Yes. And importantly in that, right, my values don't have to be somebody else's values.
Nope.
So in the context of all of this and everything I've talked about and everything I write, like it took a while, but I've gotten this, it's like everybody gets to view the world however they want to view the world and behave however they want to behave. And, in a place where, I like to say, as long as you follow the rules, as long as you obey the laws, like whatever. And if you break the rules, you break the laws, you break the norms, like depends on the severity of it.
Yeah.
Certainly, anybody who's ever drove their car faster than the speed limit has broken a law. But like, until you get pulled over and get a ticket for the 74th time, like it's not that severe. But if you step back from it, like, and you think about leadership, there's so much leadership in contemporary society that's modeled in ways that I would suggest from my frame of reference is ineffective, unhealthy,
Mhm. Like what?
repressive. I think that if you look at leaders who have clearly not dealt with their own, call it baggage, shit, history, life, whatever, and have self-reinforcing loops that might be functionally effective in terms of some elements of things, but are not particularly effective in terms of how they engage with other people or how they treat other people or how they relate to other people. And it's a cliche. I mean, think of everybody listening, I'm sure. You have a list of extremely successful, very wealthy people who are fucking miserable. And, you can say, well, they have tons of power and they have tons of money and they have this and they have
It
that. And
feels like they're winning.
yeah, they're winning. I'm like, well, what does that mean? You know, and that's everybody gets to have their definition. So my definition happens to be different. Amy and I joke all the time. One of our favorite songs is a Courtney Love song, The Girl at Doll Parts, which has a line in The Girl with the Most Cake. And I want to be the girl with the most cake. And the joke in a moment is I say, I don't want to be the girl with the most cake. And Amy says, I want to be the girl with like, do we really want to be the girl with the most cake? Like, is that winning in life? I mean, maybe for some people, but not for me.
I mean, this could get to me political very quickly. I think that's a real struggle. I want to bring it back though and talk about the role of also maybe anxiety in your life. OCD is, a lot about anxiety. And I think also that what I see when leaders are really, really sort of like King Kong going through the city, just creating wreckage, it's a lot of it is that they haven't dealt with their anxiety and they're just acting their shit out over and over again.
So I think there's two ends of the spectrum around it. It's very interesting. I think you
Mm.
described one. I think the other end of the spectrum is the leader who internalizes the anxiety, doesn't act it out,
Well, that's the anxious achiever.
right? Doesn't act it out. And in the context of that, might have great success, but has, again, in my world, absence of joy is the word. Everybody that has struggled with depression that I know that I've had long conversations about has different descriptions of what
Yeah.
their feelings are, but whatever that feeling is. And on top of it, knowing that many of the things that you try to do are not going to work, whether they're small or big. That's the nature of it, right? Your King Kong archetype isn't even noticing the destruction
Mm-mm.
that they're creating, isn't aware of it, and it's not part of their reinforcement loop. And in some ways, I think many of them think that that's just part of the way it goes.
Or they get rewarded. I mean, it's funny, just to bring it back to Jerry for a minute. I mean, one of the most powerful conversations I've ever had on this podcast was with Jerry many, many years ago because we both shared our hypervigilance. Jerry had a rough childhood and was very, very hypervigilant, right? Always scanning the environment for threats, always trying to figure out how to keep himself safe. And he very openly said that helped me for a long time at work until it didn't. And I
Yes.
think that so many of us, I relate to that. So many of us, so many of my clients relate to that. It's like this pattern that I built over so many years that really protected me also got rewarded at work. My perfectionism, my micromanaging, my hypervigilance, my whatever, my overwork. And then all of a sudden we hit bottom and it stops.
Well, and I think there's two parts to that which are awesome. I mean, and did you have tears with Jerry?
I've had so many tears with
Yeah,
Jerry. Yes.
that's the wonderful part of sitting with Jerry. The two parts to it. One, at one end of the spectrum is, uh, I think something that Jerry and I talk about a lot, which is the definition of success, and what does that actually mean?
Mm,
And regardless of, your religious tradition or, your whatever, existing traditions you come from, there are different definitions of success. And, there are some things that are, you know, history of human experience. I just trying to look for the right word for it. Humans have been trying to kill their neighbor to take over their neighbor's backyard since the beginning of humans and neighbors.
correct.
That is not a new idea,
No.
right? Um, so understanding that we're part of this long tradition of behavior on one end of the spectrum.
Hmm.
The other end of the spectrum, since the beginning of humans have been trying to figure out for themselves what creates meaning.
Hmm.
And whether that's a religious tradition, a philosophical approach, whatever.
We
And
are meaning making machines. I mean, that's how we function.
you, and by the way, if anybody wants to go down a fun rabbit hole of contemporary philosophy, there's a philosophy I discovered relatively recently called absurdism, and it gives me great comfort to embrace absurdism, which is actually, you know, pretty. I was talking about it as existential nihilism for a while. Absurdism is a much better word for it. I'm fundamentally an existentialist. I believe we create our own meaning,
Mm.
and that our experience while we're alive is a search for meaning from oneself. I grew up Jewish. I have, my religious tradition is Judaism.
Judaism is very existentialist.
That's right. One of the most powerful things about Judaism that so many people don't know is that the very first thing you learn when you're a kid is to question everything.
Yeah.
And you think about that compared to, like, when I was 10, my Baptist friends, I grew up in Texas, my Baptist friends and my Catholic friends, and they're like, no, you're not supposed to question anything.
We just do this.
This
Take
is
it on faith.
what it is. Take it on faith. And I'm like, what do you mean a God? I'm learning about science. Like, what does God mean? I don't understand.
But Brad, let me just so here's one thing I just want to address this before I forget, to the point of meaning making machines. Like, and is that when I interview people and they say things to me like, my OCD is a superpower, my trauma is my superpower, my anxiety is my superpower, I take them at face value, because, and I have bipolar disorder, because we have this thing that has been foisted upon us. We don't control it. We have to make meaning of it. And if we don't come to love it at some level, we can't ever have peace and freedom from it. And so, and it does give us strength. I mean, Paul once said to me, and this is the truest thing, if I could bottle my hypomania, I would be worth millions more than I am today, right? If I could sell hypomania to someone, it's the greatest feeling in the world. So I think that it is very human for us to try to understand our challenges. And I think we should bring them in a loving way if it helps us. Well,
I,
and also acknowledging that they really suck too.
well, I think that the last thing you just said, the combination of those things is really powerful. And this is why I don't like the superpower language. I mean,
Okay.
people can use it, but I just don't like it. I don't
Yeah.
like it for me. I think that in the search for meaning, whether it's bipolar, OCD, hypermania, anxiety, just
Hmm.
base level anxiety that doesn't have a clinical diagnosis, borderline personality disorder, go down the list of things that, many very successful people have come to understand. And I think that, society, maybe, but, there's enough people talking about it now that you can come to understand that these are positives, they have positive characteristics and negative characteristics.
Correct.
For me, OCD, let's get deeper into that. For me, the obsessive behavior had many positive characteristics. And I think, and I would use this word for a long time in the context of entrepreneurship. I hate the word passion in entrepreneurship because passion is so easy to fake. And if you're an extrovert, you're biased towards passion. If you're a hypomaniac, you're extraordinarily passionate. And if you're an introvert, you're not that passionate. You don't exude passion. That's not your energy.
Well, you don't perform passion.
Perform is a better word than
It's
exude.
performative.
That's right. And I think the dynamic of people reacting is that we mostly react to passion as performative behavior. So you can
Correct.
fake it.
You can
That's what I mean.
absolutely, you got the huckster, the salesman,
You got it.
absolutely.
You can't fake obsession.
Yeah.
You can't fake that you are put on planet Earth to work on this thing right now. So I used to talk about that as an important thing in the context of entrepreneurship, but too many people confused positive characteristics of obsession with negative characteristics of obsession. So I shifted the way I talk about it to say it's not obsession, it's not passion, it's definitely not passion. It's You were put on this planet to work on this thing
Mhm.
right now. Maybe not for the rest of your life, but right now. And that's a characteristic that's a really powerful characteristic. So you could say, well, that sounds like obsession to me, except for it's the positive part of obsession. The negative part of obsession can be extremely hurtful to others, can be extremely hurtful to yourself, can generate enormous anxiety that then as you're dealing with your anxiety, you hurt others and your behavior in that context, all of a sudden, that's not helpful. Now, in OCD, it gets even worse because you have this compulsive behavior that consumes a meaningful percentage of your brain to try to deal with the obsessive things that you're trying to control.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, your behaviors start to play out. I gotta, the only way I can get out of the house is to touch this door lock this way this many times. My magic number was 3.
Hmm.
I love the number 3. So, of course, I love the number 9, which is 3 times 3. And I love the number 27, which is 3 times 3 times 3. And if you have to do something 27 times because you didn't do it correctly 3 times, and you didn't then do it correctly 9 times, you're going to do it 27 times. You're going to take a piece of paper out, and each time you do it, you're going to write it down to make sure you can get out of that loop to do the next thing, because 81 is a lot more than 27.
Whew.
Right? So not healthy. Like I'm
Not
just
healthy.
describing
Not
something
healthy.
healthy. And so the balance between these two things, like of course, the whatever the syndrome is, and I'm not going to call it a disease because I don't think that it's useful to over label it. Like, however we want to talk about it. Like if somebody says, well, I don't want to talk about OCD as my disease, it's my superpower, don't label it either thing. It is part of your makeup, part of your chemistry, part of the things that you have to deal with. The balance between the positive and the negative, I think, is really important to understand. And it's how the negative impacts you.
Mhm.
And it's not an or clause, it's an and clause, how that negative impacts those around you. And as a leader, I think leaders who spend time trying to understand that and turn that into a positive, not a negative, then this is the internal consistency, then can have internal consistency with their own behavior,
Mm.
that internally it's not as much of a negative. So, for example, and I'll just use one from my own experience, at some point, and I haven't had this problem in a long time, so this was a real success of understanding it. I would be sort of, doing my thing. I would be tired. So a big thing that leads into a depressive episode for me is just exhaustion,
Hmm.
physiological
Yeah.
fatigue. Not just physical, but physiological.
Yeah.
And then I'd be dealing with something that was hard and significant, which in my world is kind of continual because of the role that I play. And then I would have what I started referring to as inappropriate anxiety spikes.
Oh,
So we have normal anxiety throughout the
right.
day in life. Like, okay, I'm anxious about this thing. Let me go pay attention to that thing over there or do something about it. Oh, those are healthy signals to start to feel a little anxiety about something like, I got to go deal with that. Anxiety spike would be, it was like from spinal tap, it would immediately go to 11. Right. It wasn't like I was a 1 or a 2 and now I'm a 5. It was I was a 1 or a 2 and now I'm an 11.
Yep.
And I'm not debilitated, but I'm kind of internally on fire.
You're obsessed also. You can't think about anything else.
Anything else.
Obsessed. Yeah.
Obsessed. And on fire with anxiety about one specific thing.
Yes.
And it took me a while to understand this, where I would step back from it and say, wow, that's irrational.
Hmm.
Right? Like the level of anxiety I'm feeling about this is way out of whack with what it is. I've dealt with this kind of a problem 20 times or 50 times, or, oh, it's a new problem, but it's a problem. Like I can work through it. And for me, again, external, internal, for some people, when that happens, they inflict that on everybody.
Yes. Right.
when they inflict that on everybody else, I run away from that style of leadership. I don't prefer that style of leadership. I'm not attracted to it. It doesn't when other people are doing it to me, it's not compelling to me. When I observe it in the world, it's not a compelling thing. Can it be successful? Sure. Can it generate more power and can it generate more wealth? Sure. Can it achieve end goals? Sure. Is it something I value? No. The opposite is the other side of the problem is that internally it's incredibly destructive. I hold it inside. I'm like, oh shit, now my world is on fire inside.
Yeah.
And so what's the better way to do it? Is the better way to do it hold it inside and be on fire? Or is the better way to do it, fling it at everybody else? And my answer is no,
Neither.
right? It's put some energy into understanding yourself. Work on understanding what's causing the dynamic. I describe therapy as going to Planet U. I go to Planet Brad and I spend time with my
That's great. I love it.
I pay him to listen to me for 50 minutes once a
Yeah.
week. I don't anymore because we've terminated, but in the absence of that, he has to listen to me. I'm going to say, like his job is to guide me, not to tell me the answers. And if I'm in a place where I can't talk, his job is to sit there quietly and consider whether there's something that he can move me towards to engage or whether it's better to just sit there for 50 minutes with very little. Um, but over time, like learning what's going on, I'm like, oh, I see what's causing that inappropriate anxiety spike. Like, first, I got to get a label for it. Holy shit. Like, it's not okay. It's not normal for me. I don't need this. Is it all chemistry? No. Yeah, there's some chemistry in there, but it's not all chemistry. Okay.
Do you have
Now,
sort of a greatest hits of triggers that you can think of that, um, for me, it's money. So if I feel like the bottom is falling out, like if the stock market has a really bad day, or when I read these headlines about AI, even still, even now, I will have, again, I love that word, inappropriate anxiety a spike because it's getting to the heart of that. I'm not going to be okay. I'm
I,
not going to
I,
provide.
I went like this because I have such a long list of greatest hits
I
looking
want to hear them,
for the years.
or
Well,
whatever you're comfortable. I mean,
no,
obviously.
why? I mean, in the context of relationship, and it's a red line for Amy and I that we defined early on in our relationship was a red line is infidelity.
Right.
So infidelity is a trigger for me. Another trigger for me is physical violence
Mm-hmm.
in our relationship. No physical violence. For me, I was fortunate I didn't grow up with physical violence from my parents, but there was physical violence in my environment.
Mm.
Not a lot. But I came to see that as a real trigger. I would say, as I've gotten older, I recognize what I would describe as emotional violence as a trigger. When there's a real emotional attack, usually not on me. I can handle my own emotional attack. And when I've been attacked by so many people emotionally over the years, and criticized and that sort of thing, like I can kind of know how I deal with that. It's emotional attacks on people I love,
Mm.
emotional attacks on people I'm close to. That's hard. That creates anxiety in me. Before I understood it, so there's the greatest hits along the way. Now those things don't impact me as much. Right? I don't have these anxiety spikes because I see it. I'm like, okay, that's an emotional attack on someone I love.
Right.
All right, I need to go not be passive avoidant about it. I need to go take action about it. Taking action about it is usually not, like come in with fists pummeling on the attacker. It's to try to understand what's going on and what the person who's being emotionally attacked needs and wants,
Yes.
and figuring out a way that I can be helpful in that, which then doesn't cause my anxiety to spike.
Have you ever done ACT therapy?
I haven't.
I mean, the process that you're describing is very ACT, which is that you understand the trigger, you accept the emotion, you don't try to run from it, you feel it, you accept it. You understand, is that emotion, is that trigger contradicting your values or not? Like, what value is this stirring up in me? Which to me, the emotional violence, that's like really crossing some values for you. And then you take committed action.
Well, no, I'll give, a contemporary example. And, we talk, you said, let's not veer, or this could veer into politics, but there's in the world today, forget about just US politics, in the world today, I would suggest that there's a lot of emotional violence from leaders in different places, but especially in countries.
Mhm.
And that emotional violence, pick a different label if you want, that emotional violence is very, very hard for me to listen to. And so my solution to it is to turn off the stimuli that is the emotional violence. It doesn't mean that I'm uninformed. I don't know what's going on that's impacting things. And when I see emotional violence impact people or organizations I care about, I try to engage and help. But I don't listen for it. I don't wander around day by day putting myself in a position where I am obsessively,
Yep.
which would be my problem, searching it out.
Yeah.
And that took me a long time to understand. It's like, okay, there's some things that I don't need to look at and listen to all the time to know what's going on and to be able to engage productively with all the things that are, in my world. So, it's that dynamic. Like when I was younger, these things would trigger me. Even into my 40s, these things would trigger me. Today, what I've learned for me is when I become tired, that's a starting point for recognizing that I'm in a yellow zone.
Mhm.
The language that I started using maybe a decade ago was think of about a plane, an airplane dashboard or any sort of dashboard, but instead of numbers on the dashboard, there's just lights, lots of them, lots of lights, and the lights can light up three colors: green, yellow, or red. That's it. And if all the lights are green, it's cool. When I get tired, some of the lights become yellow.
Yeah.
That's okay. Yellow, pay attention. You need to now do some stuff. If I get even more tired, occasionally the light will blink red.
Mhm.
And when a light blinks red, one, that's a warning to me to step back from what's going on and look at what's happening and adjust my behavior. And then if I don't do that, more lights start turning red. And occasionally, if the lights that are red take over, that's what either creates this massive anxiety spike or tips me into depression. So just very simple tools like that. It's like, can I handle yellow? Can I handle red? Yes. But it changes how I engage with the world so that I get back to the dashboard having green lights.
Yes.
Then, and I'll just link this to your, the superpower comment. Does my obsessive behavior or my compulsive behavior generate yellow lights? No. But if I start doing this,
Hmm.
which is one of my tells that I'm getting anxious, Amy will say, glasses. And that's it. That's all I need her to say is that I'm suddenly doing this. I have another one that's a tell, which is I cross my toes. My toes are very tactile, as
Interesting.
fingers always are, but for some reason, like I can pick things up with my feet, whatever with individual toes. Like it's a fun magic trick at parties sometimes, like pick things up off the ground. People are like, how did you do that? But if I'm doing this with my toes and clenching my toes, that's another tell,
Clenching is a big one.
right? And so did I learn these things in my 20s? No, I had no idea. It's super simple. And then all of a sudden you learn this, oh, something is bothering me. What is it?
Yep.
Something is blinking yellow. What is it? And then if I tie this all the way back around to my own behavior with passive avoidance, the things I regret. Oh, you know what? I'm not going to deal with that thing that's bothering me. That's active. That's fine.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden the clenching goes away. It's not
Mhm.
bothering me because I've decided not to deal with it. Or, you know what? I need to go deal with that issue. And all the anxiety comes down because I know how to deal with hard issues. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
But now I'm consciously addressing what the issue is. And again, that's the learning yourself. I'm not telling anybody that's listening, like, how it's going to work for them. I have no idea how it
Well,
works.
but we all have our I mean, I think what you're hitting on is, like, get to know your body, get to know your tells. I often lead people through a body scan just so they can feel their body and where am I holding this like, what does this even feel like?
Body
Like,
scan is such a magnificent thing.
I love Brad, in my last question, I wanna ask you, I just wanna pivot to leadership for a second. You know, one of the things that you've brought up, which I think is so valuable, we don't talk about it enough, is how the effects of our behavior on other people. And I'm curious your advice to people out there who are like, I really I think I need to figure out how this is affecting people on my team. That's a really brave and hard thing to do. Do you have any advice?
A couple of things. One, if that's something you're even acknowledging, just go get a coach.
Mhm.
Just go get a great coach. You don't need, like if you separate between, Give First, I separate between a mentor, an advisor, a coach, and a therapist. If you acknowledge that, go find a coach.
Yeah.
And go find a coach who's a real coach, because there's a lot of coaches in the world who don't really know what they're doing.
Yes.
And I'm actually in the same way that therapists have to have a therapist, I think every coach should have to have a coach because it's really hard. Like you're absorbing other people's stuff. You're
Totally.
engaged with it. So, and when I say go find a real coach, that's not a judgment. Any coaches listening, like I don't know, find that in the world of coaching. So it's not a judgment on anybody. It's just context of like, take it seriously. Find someone who you think can be helpful to you and engage with that coach on a regular, continual basis around the starting point issue, and then let it take you where it takes you as you try to learn yourself. The goal with the coach, I mean, I'm a long distance runner. Whenever I'm training for something, I always have a coach because even though I've run 26 marathons, I know how to run a marathon. I know how to go from no training to a marathon. Like I've done it. But it's so much more helpful to have somebody who is paying attention to what's going on, who is telling me what the next couple of steps are, who is introducing new things, who is backing me off when I'm overdoing it because all of a sudden I'm not paying attention or something else is going on in my life. And so all of those things I think are pretty foundational in the context of your question. And then I'd add one other piece to it, which is in the same way that the coach is helpful on that dimension. If you're not seeing whether it's a psychologist or psychiatrist separately, a lot of people say, well, I don't need to see a therapist because my coach is that. It's not. It's a different
It's
thing.
very different. Yeah.
And if you're willing to start to work on this and understand it, like the question that you asked is, how is my behavior impacting my team? That's a coach question. But you also, as an individual, acknowledge something, which is your behavior is affecting others. And you're interested in that and you're curious about that. That doesn't mean you're going to change it. It just means that you want to understand what's causing it, how it's affecting people, what's at the root of it. That's what the therapist is for, to help you get deeper into understanding, why am I doing this? Not how is it affecting, but
Right.
why am I doing
Why
this?
do I keep doing this?
Yeah, and is this healthy for me? Forget about my team. The coach will work on your team.
Yeah.
It's actually healthy for me. Now, your coach will help you with you too, because they're trying to help you be a better leader. But how deep is it? And, you talk about we all, trauma. Everyone has trauma of some sort. Anybody who says, I've never had any trauma in my life has a lot of trauma because they've created a situation where they're in denial of whatever their trauma is. And the trauma might have been your third grade teacher. I don't know. Like it could be random little things that add up, but it influences your behavior. And it doesn't mean that you need to stop your behavior. It means that if you understand what's underneath it, you can then decide consciously what you want to do with your behavior, how you want to act, and how you want to be in this
Right.
world.
And you're free. You have agency. You don't have to feel trapped. I mean, to me, the ultimate reason to invest in this stuff is that you are a prisoner a lot of times to behavior that you don't understand. And when you understand it, you become free.
So powerful.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. This was a lot of fun.